Hi, my name is Toni Bader. I am the adaptive physical education teacher for Seattle Public Schools. I was 2019 Adaptive Physical Education Shape America Teacher of the Year. And I want to start off with talking to you about SEL trauma and what we can do right now, and keeping it really simple. How can you have an impact? But the first thing I want you to think about is, if you were a sport or an athlete, what would you be? Give you a second to think about that. I know for me, I'm feeling a little bit like I want to have a little strategy. I'm feeling a little lethargic today after a full day of training. So I think I'm going to be a goalkeeper in soccer. I can have some explosive power still to get through the day. But that's a great segue into our students. Some may feel like ice hockey, of just full on and pretty aggressive, golf. So a lot of times we do this with animals. What kind of animal would you be, and how is that going to show who you are? Think about that, of putting it from the lens of athletes or sports. So SEL and trauma, what can we do? I want to encourage you to either write these down, or for you to use your camera on your phone, take a picture, because I want you to go through and check off what you've learned throughout the presentation. So we're understanding the basic level of theory and research in SEL and trauma. I'm going to really give you a basic overview, but a bunch of resources. I want you to identify some specific supports and strategies, implement some relationship building activities, list various resources specific to SEL. But the biggest thing I want you to walk away with is recognizing your shift of mindset and engage in some critical thinking about SEL and trauma, and how you can have an impact in your physical education class. So have that down, take a picture. I'm moving slides, but this is where your real learning's going. And we're moving slides in 3, 2, 1. All right. So in traditional, students went from their home and then they came to our school. We are now educating our schools coming into their home. So our families are going to have an intimate look into your classroom. But we also need to understand that racial equity lens of you're going into those families' homes. The culture that used to be your classroom, you're now going into the culture of multiple homes at the same time. So really think about your comfort zone in that, but also that racial equity lens, and tap into all your supports and resources to make sure you're ready to do that. Know that your scale of influence, when students came into our classroom, we definitely had a higher scale of influence of what we can do when everybody's in person. And so understanding to give yourself some grace, knowing that you're going in, and students and families sometimes just need to be able to handle and be responsive to what their basic needs are. We think that just handing out devices is just gonna solve the problem. It's not. The new stressors of technology is a big thing, and some of our students really are at that basic level of needs. And so think about, instead of students going from home to school, we're going from school into their homes. How do you know who's had trauma? You really don't. You really don't. And so we need to just sit back and not assume and think anybody could be experiencing this trauma. What I want to encourage you to do as a professional is talk to your school team of what you need to do when you see it, when you hear it, and when you're told it when you are teaching online. We are still mandatory reporters, but it's a whole nother level and a tiered system when we are going into somebody else's household and we're hearing it, and there's a piece of culture and a piece of race, a piece of socioeconomic, there's a piece of so much that goes involved in that. So I really want to encourage you to talk to your administrators in your building, your counselors, and have a tiered system and clear procedures of what you do, when, and how, when you see, hear, or told things when you are in somebody else's home. So some basic overview of trauma. If you're going to dive deep in any trauma, know that you're going to be told about ACEs. ACEs is adverse childhood experiences. And there's a study that has gone in, and I put a hot link here for you for that. And it talks about this correlation of your score of how many ACEs you get to the predicting factors of your health as you grow older. So if you have depression, sexual abuse, domestic violence, homelessness, all part of each one of those is a point. And so points end up, and you see that there's a more correlation, not a direct correlation, but a more of a correlation to individuals having suicide, smoking, addictions in their lives. But one of the things that we really want to think about, and I found this visual and it's really resonated with me, it's not only your adverse childhood experiences, it's your adverse community environments. And we hear this so much about the dual pandemic that we're having right now, the COVID, and also the racial tensions and the racial injustice that we have in our nation. And so our families, our students are really having some heavy emotions and experiences going on, and we need to be aware of that. And so there's a lot of resources out there, a lot of trauma-informed resources, but if you're going to go deep into this, really do a little bit more research on ACEs. Once we have those ACEs, we really need to understand how do we move beyond those experiences, and that's resiliency. And so one of the things I want you to think about is this piece of resiliency, in that we have the stressors and hard things that happen to us, and then we have the good things and the resources, and then you have what you can't control. And so for us as physical educators, when we are doing our classrooms, I want you to think about what you can provide, what you can do as a good, positive influence for your students. And so that resiliency happens when the bad things are outweighed by the good things, resources, and supports you have. And so you have a very influential ability to impact your students. And so think about that and the resiliency that you can do. If you want more information for this, please look up sounddiscipline.org. Really great organization that changed my life, changed how I taught. A little bit of shift. Any school is talking about RTI, MTSS. So us as physical educators, the general physical education teacher, you want to be looking at all students. And so I just got put onto this ripple effect. I have not gone really deep into it, but all of you know the triangle. The triangle is everywhere we go. So when we're looking at this, you all are going to be doing that tier 1 supports, that SEL supports for all of your students. What happens next then is you're supporting the secondary and then the individual students. And so thinking about how you are going to organize your classroom so that you are really impacting all students, then meeting the needs of your most highly impacted students. Huge thing that I'm hoping this whole experience is going to do is really show the value of physical education. And so I was a participant in the Phys Ed Summit of 2020 and was really impressed with the calm classroom climate and how they looked at what are our SEL through CASEL competencies, and then the overlap to our physical education standards. And so when we're really doing our work, we're just not randomly doing things. We want to be really intentional that we're hitting our standards, we're hitting our competencies, and really having an impact on our students through our planning and design. Love this visual of trauma-informed care. Of all the visuals that I've seen of trauma-informed care, this is one of my favorites. And what comes out of it is like some pillars that we really need to do. The build of self-worth, the restoring power. Power has been taken away from our students of trauma. And most impacted are students of color. And then creating that safe context. And if you see like a resounding consistency through this, it's choice. It's about having that physical safety. It's about building relationships. And so what I'm going to do as we go through this presentation is give you some really specific things that you may think are basic, but these are the things that can start setting that foundation for you to have some amazing trauma-informed care and impact with your culture, community, and relationships with students. As I sat back and I looked at what the challenge is in front of us, we are challenged with something brand new. And I see all the time people saying, oh, it's like it's my first year teaching again. It's not. There's so many of you that are phenomenal teachers. What I want you to do is I made this little executive functioning chart to think about how you set up your class when you're face-to-face and now distance learning. You know how to plan your year. You know how to set up your classroom. You know how to build relationships, communicate with your home, school, peers. How do your students know where to find information? How do you get them to get moderate to vigorous physical activity? How do you get them to show learning and give feedback? And so look at, really unpack what you were doing and how you were teaching in your classrooms, and then think about how you can be innovative to do that in distance learning. So if I was doing previous work of welcoming my kids, I stood at the door. I really was intentional in this as a general physical education teacher. And no matter how I was trying to set up, even if it was not complete, I met my students at the door. I said hello to each student as they came in. So are you doing that as students come into your distance learning? Are you looking at all your students and figuring out where the needs are and connecting with those that have the highest needs? Are you still sending newsletters home? How do you get kids to get active? When you're doing students to give feedback, are you doing turn-in talks? Did they give you exit tickets? Did they do little projects? So think about what you did in your classroom and how you can mimic that innovatively in a distance learning classroom. So here are some ideas. With relationships, traditional in-person, I used to do basketball with my kids. I gave up. I'll admit that was my choice. I gave up my lunch and my recess time, my prep time, to have open court so that kids would come in and I'd play basketball with them. So thinking about that, could you also set up with the app Home Court, or even do minute to win it with crumpled up paper and laundry baskets, or a box, or a sweatshirt put in a circle? Could you set up time with students to do just a fun basketball activity? Find out what their interests are and engage them that way. Because without knowing it, you already were communicating with families with no physical contact. Because a high-level teacher would be sending home newsletters. They would be calling families, sending emails, still communicating, but it looked a little bit different. So now with the distance learning, we just need to elevate that even more. And so what helps when we start getting overwhelmed is to do T-charts or different written examples so that we can actually unpack it, unlay it, and really look at everything we're doing and how we can have a positive impact. If we're going to get those students in, I love that we're talking about standards. I love that we're talking about high-level teaching. I love that we talk about all students. But that one of those first slides I sent from that students went from home to school. Now they're going from our school is going to their home. We need to motivate them even more to show up. So motivation is the key, and motivation needs to be a priority. And so we need to think about how we're going to get them to click in, right? Click in. Are you going to do TikTok challenges? You need to have student voice. You need to think about student surveys. Yes, our family is going to be overwhelmed with surveys, but you need to think intentionally how and when you're going to use that. So some examples to come. First example, right? So traditionally we did a move-a-thon, and what I said is cumulatively and collaboratively, if the school hit a certain number of laps, I would teach the next day, and I would drive in on my motorcycle in a pink tutu. Anybody that knows me knows I don't wear skirts, and secretly pink is my favorite color. But this motivated students beyond belief. So we need to tap into the students as they're talking to each other on online gaming. They're texting each other, they know each other, they're connecting with families. So tier your rewards. If I have 80% of the class click in, I'll do a dance. If 100% of the class clicks in, I'll teach in a tutu, right? So give incentives that you're comfortable with, but that are fun. That's what's going to engage kids to click in. That's what we need to be doing in the beginning of the school year. Student surveys. There are so many student surveys going out there, and a ton of them are really heavy. Many pages, many questions. So I would think about, are you going to be able to jump on your school surveys? Are you going to do it separate? But some of the biggest questions that I think are resonating with me is what worked in the spring? What didn't work in the spring? What equipment do you have at home? What do you need to engage? And what's the best way to communicate with you? What I also want to say with student surveys, it shouldn't be a one-time thing. This needs to be continuous throughout this year, throughout this whole process. Please make sure you're engaging the students and you're engaging that student and family voice. With that, it's not all on you. Know that you are not alone. Please connect with your school staff, with your PE peers, with your state organizations, national organization, social media, other local community partners, and just be creative where else. Because we shouldn't be on an island on our own for this. When you're setting up your classroom, think about what the skeleton was before, right? What is the way you're greeting students? What are your norms, target outcomes, the different calming activities? What's your closing? Do you have exit tickets? So what is your skeleton, and how can you transfer that skeleton for consistency with your students? I'm going to give you some examples as we go through. Your welcome mat. Think about how you're going to have students coming into your physical education classroom. Are you going to have students be in a waiting room? I mean, all the platforms are going to be all over the place, right? It depends on your district. It depends on what you are given. You got to make work. If students have a waiting room, are you going to have them enter one at a time and you specifically greet each student? Are you going to set up as part of your warm-up an icebreaker each day? Are you going to say hello? And maybe try to say hello in different ways. Hola, different languages, sign language. Is your opening platform, say class starts at 9 o'clock, are you going to open it up at 8:50 because those kids are itching to get social with each other? Are you going to be on there and monitor the class beforehand so they can have social time and connect? But at 9 o'clock, class starts. So think about that. Are you going to have an entry task? Class starts at 9 o'clock. I need you to take 5 as you enter. We're going to start at 9:05. So an example of the task, warm up. In my day treatment program, we did a warm up, take 5. Students would run a lap. They would do 5 jumping jacks, 5 toe touches, 5 push-ups, 5 wall sits. Right? It was simple. They could do it on their own. They could be successful with it. And I gave them options, so that universal design. You could do a wall push-up. You could do a seated chair push-up. You could do a plank push-up. You could do a knee push-up. You make it so students can be successful. So how can we have students enter our classroom and still take 5? What are the 5 things I need to start my online? What equipment do I need to gather? One of the things that I'm noticing as I'm doing all these webinars, I'm staring at a screen so much and my eyes are hurt. I'm getting headaches. So give students 5 different focal points to look at, and they have to identify those at different depths so they can start really training their eyes so it's not just 1D instead of 3D. That's self-talk. You could do 5 positive statements or just do 1 positive statement 5 times. I'm going to work hard. I'm going to work hard. I'm going to work hard. I'm going to work hard today. I'm going to work hard. And then 5 deep breaths. All of that can be completed pretty quick. And so students coming in will be able to complete that. Another warm up. Think about, I know for a couple of years, I just put music on and students came in and they did some laps and they were able to walk and talk with a partner. They could jog, they could run if they needed, and they could dance with the music. So with this, could you give some music and have students in the first 2-3 minutes dance, right? And give a couple different options. They can stand up and dance. They could seat and dance. They can just do their head. They could do the arm movement. You need to make sure, though, whatever environment they're in, that the volume and the movements don't cause an impact in their living environment, right? So if I'm dancing, love that this shows you, gives the example. Anybody that knows me, that was a stretch for me. I hate dancing, but it really connects with kids. Next thing you can do, though, is to get that student voice, to get that diversity, is ask students for music suggestions to start out the class. You screen it, make sure that it's clean, and then put it up. You can even get student voice of have students picking a dance move that all students do. All right, so just think about how you can engage students in the beginning of class. That's fun and then also engaging. A really important thing that we need to be aware of is also pronouncing students' names. It's huge in the social emotional piece of our classrooms. My son's name, Giuseppe. We call him Gio, Giuseppe. Sometimes I call it Papino. But when he gets older, his voice should come out what he wants to be called. For example, when I was teaching at a school, we had an Abdi Kadir, Abdi Samed, Abdi Kareem. And what I don't want to happen is that I just blanket call everybody Abdi. We need to make sure that we are asking students to pronounce their names. We are engaging in calling them their names and pronouncing them correctly. So some fun ways to do this, so it's not just so rote. Think about when you're taking attendance. If I'm doing a lesson-focused activity of yoga, I can say, hey, come onto the screen, tell me your name and your favorite yoga pose. You could either tell me, you can demonstrate, or without the screen on, you can then pronounce it. And if a kid doesn't want to put their screen on, but they want to have their word, all I have is an envelope. I cover up the envelope. They can't see my background, but you can still see me. And then they can turn off the screen and go back. Just thinking of all these ways for them to be able to talk and say their name, their identity, who they are. Another thing that we use, there's a lot of different social emotional curriculums out there and identifying feelings. There's a lot of different research with it, but I just wanted to give you some examples. We could do the thermometer, right? So we can go, how are you feeling? Good, bad, anywhere in between. If you're doing anything with the screen, please set it up that you have numbers with it so somebody who doesn't have their screen on can actually then put the number in the chat. Done another fun thing for especially younger students is all I did was go on to Google and I did some clip art of different feelings and with dogs, puppies, to make it fun, right? Really connect and kind of get out of the thinking piece of it. Icebreakers. So what I'm thinking is I did University of Wisconsin lacrosse. I did adventure education. And I'm thinking about some of my adventure ed games and activities that I would do in person and how can I make these online. And so have you ever was a game where there was poly spots all around in a circle and somebody standing in the middle like musical chairs, and I would say, I have traveled outside of the United States. And anybody who that applied to, they would leave their spot, run through the middle and go to an empty spot. Person in the middle goes, and then the next person that was left, musical chairs, is saying the next statement. So what we could do online is you turn your screen on, everybody's screen's off, you turn your screen on if it applies to you. If students don't know how to turn the screen on and off, again, just use a piece of paper and they can cover up the camera. If they don't have their camera on, they can do a thumbs up, an emoji, they can do a yes, they can type in the chat. The disclaimer, I use that example on purpose. Beware of the trauma, triggering, or privileged comments. Being able to travel outside the United States takes a little bit of privilege, cash, and ability to do. So make sure that your statements, questions are responsive, culturally responsive. Another one is in relation. So if students have their screens on, I like cooking. I can go really close to the screen if I really like it. I can go really far away if I don't. In between if it's like, eh. Same thing, pair those with numbers, 1 to 10. 1 really close, 10 really far away. Students can put that into their chat. So a couple ideas of some adventure games and how we change it. Because like, in the gym, I'd have kids go to this end of the gym if it really relates to them, and this end of the gym if they don't. Think about how you can do that with the online platform. Questions of the day. So each day as an icebreaker, could you use a different physical education, physical activity question? If you were a sport or activity, what would you be? Huh, sounded familiar. If you were any position in any sport, what would you be? The one thing that I do like is if you could name an athlete that starts with the first letter of your name, if they don't know, hey, how about you go ask your family, friends, come back the next time we have a meeting so that they're engaging that social piece. But again, have that trauma sensitive classroom tip of not all students had a positive summer. Not all students have the privilege to do really expensive travel things. So if you are, I want you to think, and that's that critical thinking piece. What is my practice? Am I being fully inclusive? Am I being culturally responsive? Think about that. Because your words matter. Your words matter in how safe your students feel in your classroom. Because how safe students feel depends on the relationships. What I love about this visual of the teacher in red and then all of the students in blue, some students, it's a lot easier to build a relationship with others. Some students, you really need to work to connect with. But it's your job to connect with all students. One of the things that we did in our classrooms, if you're doing positive discipline or sound discipline, is the thought of the 5 to 1. Give 5 compliments for every one corrective statement. With this, there's the tiered system. Again, we talked about this in the ripple effect slide. I should be teaching social emotional throughout the whole day. I see a lot of PE teachers that are going to be taking advisories and splitting students up so there's smaller classrooms. So that's a huge, like, all school approach for social emotional learning. Another thing is looking at those tier 3 students, those students that need additional individual support, specific support. So those students, are you as a PE teacher going to take on 1 to 2 students and making sure you engage 4 to 10 minutes each week? So you're doing a couple minutes maybe each day, or you're making sure you connect multiple times a day with one specific student. Think about how you're building those individual relationships. And again, you're not on the island alone with this. Think about your school-based organization and how you're planning that. One of the things I found, and it depends on the platform you're with, is using the chat box. I know when I was using the Zoom, I was able to give individual feedback comments to specific students that other students couldn't see. So as much as you could, if you have a chat option to individually talk to students, please do so. A lot of what we're dealing with and experiencing in our society right now and in our lives is a lot of heavy emotions and experiences. And we want to make sure that in our relationships, we have a lot to appreciate and positives rather than that heavy. So is that something that you can do to send out a positive quote each day? Can you do just an email blast, Schoology, WebNote, whatever platform you're on, send something positive out for students, because you don't know how much negative they're getting in, right? So you want to make sure you send out that positivity and think about how you can do that. We talked a little bit about this, the safe environment. I love the ostrich. The fact that, you know, we don't know what people are going through, how they're coming back. So when we are the community, we're modeling what we're doing. We're adjusting our pacing, and we're giving options how students can respond. One of the things I did when I was teaching is the exit tickets were huge. So my older students, we did a survey monkey at the end of each class, and any type of survey that you want to do, the wows, wonders, and questions, or things I like, things I didn't like, and questions I have. I'm just going to call it out straight. What did you like? What didn't you like? Because I don't want to fluff that too much so that I can actually be responsive to my students. Make sure you're floating through your breakout rooms, you're addressing any issues. Look for the students that are struggling so you connect those activity safety statements, and please make sure you show up. You showing up and putting aside just like you do with teaching, and your door opens and you're there for your students. Safety statements. I love this one. This was a student or a neighbor of mine that was riding his bike, and he was just exhausted, and his mom's like, 1 more lap. So just the thought, if we're asking kids to bike and they don't really have the skills, and you're saying, hey, we need to get this many minutes a day for physical activity, go out and ride your bike, that kid falls, who's liable? Well, my PE teacher told me that I needed to go bike. Think about that. Safety statements. Some kids have a house, a yard to do their activity in. Some are in apartment buildings and they have people next to them. If they're doing jumping jacks, they're wiggling the floor next to them, or if they're throwing balls in their house, like, think about what you're asking the students to do in the environment they have. And then that show and tell. I was in a class and we were talking about an activity, and a student showed up and was like, here's my switchblade. And we had to, just like in class, there was a behavior, we need to not respond to reinforce that behavior. And we needed to make sure that we said, hey, is that something that's safe for everybody? Can we talk about that later, just you and I? And we made sure we communicated with the family about that. But we don't know which students that's in their background. We don't know what students are going to bring to our screen. So just be aware of your safety statements of when you're asking kids to share what they may actually share. You're doing feedback. Think about your feedback of how you're doing audio, video, written, group share, dropping in compliments. Please make sure you're providing stems for compliments, because students, they need to learn how to compliment. And so a huge part of it is you being able to give a stem. Mindfulness. One of the things, we don't know what equipment students have. One of my favorite things that I did with our in tandem or our day treatment program is the mindfulness of having your hand out. So we did breathing of deep breath in, out, deep breath in, out, deep breath in, out, deep breath in, out, deep breath in, out. What I love about the hand breathing is the fact that it's tactile. There's no equipment needed. There's an expected number of outcome, and you can do it anywhere. So if we need to do a closure where we're bringing ourselves back down, we're involving breathing, this is one option for you. Another one, a little more. All right, if you want a little more technology, check out this mindfulness or musitation. What she does is she has this beautiful song that goes along, universal design in multiple options and ways to participate, and really engages and hits you here. And so it really resonates with me. I have the hot link here for you. So as you're looking at this slide, please check it out, or you can go to YouTube and check out musitation. Really amazing. And I would encourage you to look at her resource here. What we're doing is really important, but I really want you to think about, what is your need? I know for me, in order for me to engage, I need to have a little bit of fun. So think about your students, and when you are doing activities, what is the fun factor in that? Engage the students in their voices, hear what really engages them, what is fun for them, and incorporate that into your teaching. With that teaching, you need to have that universal design. We talked about that a little bit earlier with the musitation. What you see in this slide is we did basketball, and I had 4 to 5 different baskets that they could shoot on. The top basket, a garbage basket, a hula hoop, a laundry basket. Students got to shoot from any poly spot, and there was different distances. They had different balls. And so if you shot it, you made it, you take it. We can do the same thing setting up at home. We can have students be engaging in different baskets, right? That target, and then different distances, giving different options. So think about when you are presenting anything for your students and activities to participate in, that you have that universal design approach and thinking about giving at least 3 different options for students to participate in. With that, know that a lot of times your families are going to be there to help participate. So whether you're doing hybrid and your classes are in person, but your special ed teacher and your IAs are putting it on, or your families at home are helping support you, the more visuals you can provide, the better. I really love this example as a visual. It names what the activity is. It labels each critical element, and then it gives a picture and a descriptive factor for it. So as you are presenting to your learners, think about how you're going to utilize visual posters, visual supports. One of the things that I put together is a really simple activity calendar. So thinking about it from the most simplistic way, we're doing this with my family. I want to make sure I have the whole child, the whole approach. How are we doing fitness. How are we being social with each other? How are we calming down? How are we doing nutrition? How are we having fun? And so these 5 factors, as we go through the day, at the end of the day at dinner, I'm asking, hey, did we get our walk in? Did we get our workout in? Did I do something social? Did I do something calming? Did I actually take some breaths today? My nutrition. I know that not all of my students have the privilege to have fresh fruits and vegetables. We can talk about hydration. We can talk about presenting meals, even if they're getting a fast food, coming and saying, hey, can we do this at the table? So thinking about all the different nutritions. So if this is going to be an attachment as a handout, we need to give stems and supports for families. So when we say fitness, what does that mean? And here are your fitness examples. We could take our weeks for each one of these rows and teach the different fitness, teach the different social, teach the different calming. And so think about that as you're doing planning, but keeping it as simple as you can. We need to teach what those expectations look like, sound like, and the whys. We do that in our classrooms. We should be doing that online also. What I really love about this is thinking about the videos. So again, I hot linked it. What does video expectations, what does it mean to show up on video? And so this is one of the special education teachers in our district. She did a pre-teaching that went home asynchronous to our families to say, hey kids, this is what online expectations look like. Here's that really critical thinking piece. I want you to think, in my social emotional learning, in my approach, am I being inclusive? Thinking about, is SEL being used as another form of policing? Are you making all your students conform to your ways? Or are you using that student voice and really engaging them? I read this article and I found it on Facebook and it was really phenomenal. I hot linked it here for you. That really made me think more about my social emotional learning approach. And I'm not a dictator in my classroom. It can't be my way or the highway. I need to think about how I can be inclusive, how I can have conversations and practices and curricula that are beyond my white cisgender norms. And so thinking about that and being vulnerable to that, I want you to think, because none of the social emotional curriculums, I'll be honest, and I want you to think, are really the solution, the approach for all of it. So whatever you're working with, be a critical thinker. Think, what are the positives for it? And are they really engaging students? Be flexible in your expectations, how you are engaging students, how they're accessing the internet, or how they're submitting work. Just have that student voice. Think about that. One of the things when I sit back and I'm thinking, what's working and why? Campabilities, I was really impressed with what Lauren Lieberman was doing with her campabilities over the summer, giving the students a kit, right? And then participating in the camp Zoom. We have people that are doing online fitness, the 10-minute workouts. Our PEPS group, I have a 10-month-old kid, and we're doing PEPS meetings every week. We show up. We know every Thursday is a PEPS meeting. And it's been this solid, consistent connection for us that has helped us through these COVID times. And it's been phenomenal. Outdoors for All has been doing some yoga, caps it at 12 students for a 10-week series. And those students build relationships through that time. She has the magic recipe of what the lesson looks like. It's a slow pace. Kids get to express themselves and talk. So think about what's working in these times and why. Unpack that and embrace that for your. When you're doing this, please make sure you're having that self-care. We hear it over and over again. So my assignment to you is think about, what is one thing that gives you worth? Please write it down right now. Identify it, celebrate it, take time for it. Reflect, change up your own practice. What is showing up as we leave here? What does showing up mean for you? What are you taking away for this presentation? Some resources. So I'll end with this real quick in the slides. I wanted to make sure the Distance Learning Playbook by Hattie, really phenomenal. A lot of different online resources, functions, tools for you out there. It depends on what your district is allowing you to use. So thought this was an amazing visual. Some great webinars, some websites that I have found are really valuable, and also some other websites. So I hope that this connected hit all of our learning outcomes. I hope that you're inspired. I hope that I gave you some critical thinking. Please connect. Please support each other. And I hope you have a great year. Thank you.